My name is Nathaniel Becker, and I was born and raised on a farm in the heart of Montana, within a close-knit Hutterite community. From the moment I was old enough to understand, I was taught that our way of life, following the rules, working hard, and praying earnestly, was the only path to salvation. We lived simply, without the distractions of modern technology or comforts, and everything we did was in service to God and our community. Growing up, I never questioned the way we lived. It was just the way things were. I would wake up early, tend to the animals, help with the fields, and then attend worship. The rhythm of our daily life was structured and peaceful, and it gave me a sense of purpose. Our elders often spoke about the importance of obeying the traditions, and they emphasized that our faith was defined by what we did. If you worked hard and followed the rules, you were living right with God. But as time went on, I couldn't shake a feeling deep inside. It was subtle at first, a quiet, nagging question that whispered to me in moments of solitude. Was I truly connecting with God, or was I just going through the motions? I followed the rules diligently, but there were times when I felt empty. My prayers felt mechanical, my work routine, and my relationships with others seemed surface level. There were moments when I caught myself wondering if there was more to faith than simply obeying the traditions. But I was afraid to voice those doubts, as questioning the way we lived could lead to judgment. So I kept them to myself and continued living the way I had always known, hoping that my efforts were enough. There were moments in my life when I couldn't ignore the doubts creeping into my mind. It wasn't anything outward, nothing I could point to and say, "This is the problem." But something inside me felt off, and I couldn't shake it. You see, the teachings we followed in our community were all about rules: how to live, how to dress, how to work, and how to worship. They told us that following these rules was the key to salvation. It was clear: obey the traditions, and you'd be rewarded in the end. But as I grew older, I started to notice something that didn't quite fit. I saw people in our community who were so kind, so generous, and so full of love, yet they didn't follow every rule as strictly as the rest of us. I remember a neighbor, Lydia, who always went out of her way to help others. She'd visit the sick, take food to those in need, and listen to people's struggles with such compassion. But she didn't always follow every teaching to the letter. Sometimes she wore a bonnet that wasn't quite right or didn't attend every service. Despite that, I could feel the love of God in her actions more than I ever felt it in my own. I started wondering, is salvation really about perfect obedience to a set of rules? Or is there something deeper? Something more about love, kindness, and compassion? I didn't dare speak these thoughts aloud. After all, questioning the teachings was dangerous. People would say I was losing my way, that I wasn't taking my faith seriously. So I buried those questions deep inside, pushing them down whenever they surfaced. But the more I suppressed them, the more they grew, gnawing at me from the inside. It was a stormy afternoon, one of those days where the sky seems to hang heavy with dark clouds and the wind howls through the trees. I had been working on the grain silo for hours, making sure everything was secure before the storm hit. It wasn't the first time I'd been up there, but something about that day felt different. Maybe it was the wind or the way the clouds seemed to churn in the sky, but I had a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. I tried to push it aside, telling myself it was just nerves. As I worked on securing the structure, I heard a loud creak above me, followed by a sharp crack. Before I could even react, the silo began to collapse. The sound of wood and metal splintering filled the air, and I didn't have time to move. The next thing I knew, I was buried under a heavy pile of debris. It all happened so fast I couldn't process it. The weight on top of me felt suffocating, and every breath was a struggle. My body felt like it was on fire, yet at the same time, there was a numbness that spread through me. I remember feeling a strange calmness. It was like everything around me was slowing down. My mind was clear, but my body refused to respond. The pain started to fade, and with it, I began to lose track of time. The sounds of the storm, the wind, and the world outside seemed to disappear. All I could feel was this heaviness pressing down on me, and I knew I was slipping away from this world. And as I felt myself drifting, I wondered if I had done enough with my life, if all the things I believed in had truly been worth it. When I first became aware of my surroundings, I thought I was dreaming. But this wasn't like any dream I'd ever had. I woke up, or at least I thought I did, to find myself in an endless gray expanse. It wasn't dark, but it wasn't bright either. Just this strange, neutral light that seemed to fill everything. The air was thick, and I couldn't quite explain it, but it felt heavy. Not in a bad way, just overwhelmingly still. There were no sounds, no breeze, no movement. It was as if the entire world had frozen in place, and I was standing in the middle of it, completely alone. At first, I thought I had to be dead. There was no other explanation. But even as I thought that, something inside me held on to a shred of doubt. It felt different than what I imagined death would be like. There was no pain, no fear, just this strange peace. A peace that was hard to explain, and honestly, a bit unsettling. I stood still, trying to make sense of it. My mind was racing. Was I dreaming? Was this some kind of vision? I could feel that something was off, like I wasn't supposed to be here, but I didn't know how to leave. I tried to call out, but my voice was swallowed by the vast emptiness, as if the air itself consumed every sound. And then something shifted. I couldn't see anyone, but I sensed a presence, like I wasn't alone, although I couldn't put my finger on what was there. It wasn't frightening, but it made me feel small, insignificant in a way. It felt like the space was aware of me, like it was waiting for me to understand something. Before I could think much more, memories started to flash around me, so vividly as if I was living them again. But from the outside looking in, they weren't just passing by like regular memories. They were unfolding around me right in front of my eyes. I saw my childhood, growing up on the farm, my father's stern but loving face, the way we worked together, side by side. I saw the laughter at family dinners and the quiet moments of prayer. But as these scenes continued, they started to shift. They became more personal, more intimate, showing the parts of my life I didn't often think about. I saw myself at moments of doubt, times when I questioned the rules, when I felt I was just going through the motions, following the script because it was expected of me, not because it came from the heart. I saw the times I ignored people who needed help, or when I turned away from someone who was struggling, thinking they weren't following the right path. The memories felt alive, not like things I had done, but like pieces of me I had forgotten, pieces I had pushed aside because they didn't fit into the picture I had created of myself. I felt a deep sense of sorrow as I watched these moments unfold. It was like seeing my life through someone else's eyes, with all the mistakes, all the things I hadn't done right, and all the things I could have done better. The weight of regret settled on me. It wasn't a sharp pain, but a deep, aching understanding that I had missed something vital, something crucial. The strange, still landscape around me seemed to grow heavier with each memory, and I couldn't help but feel like I was being shown all of this for a reason. I wasn't just seeing my life play out. I was being shown who I truly was beneath all the rules and appearances. The real me, the one I had hidden from everyone, including myself. And I knew then that I had more to learn. There was something more, something bigger, waiting for me to understand it. As I stood in that strange, quiet place, watching my life unfold before me, something began to change within me. The memories continued to come. Moments from my past, familiar scenes, yet they felt different, like I was seeing them for the first time. But this time something was wrong. The feelings they stirred weren't comforting or reassuring. Instead, they brought a heavy weight, one that sank deep into my chest. I had always believed that my life, my devotion, my commitment to the rules would earn me praise, maybe even God's favor. I thought that if I simply followed the traditions of our community and adhered to the teachings, I would be living in God's will. But the more I watched, the more I realized that something was deeply off. My strict adherence to rules hadn't made me closer to God. It had created walls between me and the people around me. I was shown how, time and again, I had judged others for not following the rules the way I did. I had looked down on those who didn't measure up to the standards I believed were essential. There were moments when people came to me, seeking help or understanding, but instead of offering compassion, I turned them away or criticized them for not living up to the right way. One memory that stood out was of a young man named Samuel, a neighbor who had been struggling with his faith. He had always been a quiet soul, searching for meaning in the world. I remember how one winter he came to me for guidance. He was doubting whether the life we lived was enough to connect with God, and in his vulnerability, he was searching for someone to listen. But instead of showing him kindness, I gave him nothing but a lecture about the importance of obeying the rules and following tradition. I didn't listen to his heart or try to understand his pain. I simply reinforced what I had been taught, that obedience was the only way. Watching that moment again, I felt a deep shame. Samuel was crying out for connection, for love, and I had dismissed him because his struggles didn't fit into my narrow view of faith. The worst part, I had done the same to others, family, friends, even strangers. My focus had always been on the outward appearance of faith, on doing the right things and saying the right words. But I had completely missed the deeper truth: love, compassion, and understanding. I had become so wrapped up in the rules that I had lost sight of what they were meant to represent. I thought that by living according to tradition, I was serving God. But now in this strange place, I saw clearly that my actions, though they seemed virtuous on the surface, lacked the essential elements of love and grace. I had built my faith on a foundation of tradition, not on a real personal relationship with God. I had forgotten that faith wasn't just about following rules. It was about knowing God in the deepest parts of your heart. The more I saw, the more it became clear. I had lived my life checking off boxes, but I had never truly asked myself why I was doing these things. Was it because I love God, or was it simply because it was expected? I realized then that I had used tradition as a shield to keep myself from the messiness of true faith, the kind of faith that requires vulnerability, compassion, and an open heart. I had relied on what I could control, what seemed safe, rather than trusting in God's grace and embracing His love. And in doing so, I had missed the most important part of it all. As I stood there in that endless, quiet space, something began to shift. The weight of my regrets, the overwhelming sorrow of realizing how far off track I had gone, was almost unbearable. But then something changed. It was subtle at first. A warmth, a gentle energy that seemed to surround me. It wasn't like the cold, distant emptiness I had felt earlier. No, this was different. It was as though the very air around me began to hum with life. I didn't see anything at first, but I felt it. Something or someone drawing near. It wasn't frightening. It wasn't intimidating. In fact, it was the opposite. I felt this immense sense of peace, something I had never felt before in my life. The weight that had pressed on me seemed to lift, and I could feel my heart beating steadily in my chest like it was in perfect rhythm with everything around me. It was a peace that reached deep into the very core of my being, a peace that I didn't understand, but I felt with every part of me. Then the presence revealed itself. It wasn't in the way I thought it would be. There were no grand visions or booming voices, nothing that would have fit into the picture I had always imagined of God. It was simply a presence, warm, radiant, and powerful. But there were no words spoken, not the kind we use in this world. Instead, there was understanding, deep, profound understanding that reached past all the barriers I had built around my heart. It was as though this presence knew everything about me, not just the outward actions or the things I had done, but the thoughts and feelings I had hidden deep inside. There was no need for words because the understanding was so complete, so whole. In that moment, I knew that I was seen in a way I had never been seen before. Every doubt, every fear, every regret, every hope, it was all laid bare, and yet there was no judgment, no condemnation. There was only love, a kind of love that I had never truly known before. Not the kind that comes from obeying rules or doing what is expected, but the kind of love that accepts you for who you truly are. It was a love that didn't require perfection or the fulfillment of some set of conditions. It was simply love. And in that understanding, I was shown something I had never realized before. Salvation isn't about the rules or appearances. It's not about following a set of traditions or checking off boxes to make sure we've lived the right way. No, salvation is about grace. It's about being loved despite our flaws, despite our failures. It's about the humbling realization that we are not perfect, but we are still loved, still accepted, still valued. I had spent my life thinking that salvation was a matter of what I did, that it was something to be earned. But now in the presence of this love, I realized that it was never about that. It was about grace, the undeserved gift of God's love, given freely with no strings attached. In that moment, I also understood that true faith isn't about outward actions or strict adherence to traditions. It's about humility. It's about recognizing that we are not the ones in control. We can't earn our way into God's favor with deeds or appearances. True faith is about surrendering our pride, letting go of our need for approval or validation, and simply accepting the love that is offered to us. It's about knowing that we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be open to God's love and open to the grace that flows from Him. This presence, this understanding, didn't condemn me for my past or for all the times I had failed to live with true compassion and love. Instead, it simply offered me a way forward, a new path, a path of grace, love, and humility. A path that wasn't based on rules, but on a deep personal relationship with God, where love was the foundation of everything. And for the first time in my life, I felt free from the burden of trying to measure up, free from the weight of expectations, free to simply love and be loved in return. As I stood there, bathed in that warm, radiant presence, something started to change. The peace I had felt began to deepen, and I felt as though I was being wrapped in a blanket of comfort and understanding. But it wasn't just the peace that touched me. It was the knowledge that something important was happening, something that I couldn't fully grasp yet, but something deep within me knew was happening. I had felt lost for so long, but now in the presence of this love and understanding, I began to realize that I wasn't finished. I was given a chance to return to the life I had known, but now with a deeper understanding, an understanding of what truly matters. The presence, though gentle, communicated this to me without words. There was no booming voice, no grand pronouncement, but the message was clear. My journey was far from over. I wasn't being condemned, but rather being sent back to continue what I had started. Only now I was being shown how to live differently. I had always thought of life as something to be measured by accomplishments, by following the rules, by doing what was expected of me. But now I saw that it wasn't about any of that. It was about living in connection with others, living with a heart full of love and grace, and living in humility before God. I wasn't just being told to go back and follow the rules more strictly or work harder. No, I was being shown that my life was meant to be about relationships, about compassion, about letting go of the need for control or perfection, and instead accepting God's love and sharing it with others. As I started to fade from this strange, ethereal realm, I felt something that I had never experienced before, an overwhelming sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from making everything right or from getting everything in order. It was a peace that came from simply knowing I was loved. A peace that came from understanding that I didn't need to prove myself, that I didn't need to be perfect, that I didn't need to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders anymore. This peace filled me in a way that nothing else ever had. It was as if I had been living my life with my eyes closed, constantly striving and trying to meet expectations, only to realize that the true peace was always there, waiting for me to embrace it. I had spent so many years focused on the outside, the rules, the traditions, the expectations, and had missed the deeper truth that peace and love come from within. I had been looking for it in all the wrong places, but now I understood that it had always been within reach. As I felt myself drifting away from that realm, leaving the presence that had so completely transformed my understanding, I knew my life would never be the same again. I wasn't returning with all the answers or with the promise of an easy life, but I was returning with something far more important. A new perspective, a new understanding of what it means to truly live, to truly love, and to truly follow God. The peace I felt wasn't just a fleeting moment, it was something that would stay with me, something I could carry with me back into my world. And I knew with every part of me that I had been given a second chance, not just to live my life again, but to live it in a way that was full of grace, love, and humility. My journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. I woke up to the sound of beeping machines and the sterile smell of a hospital room. The first thing I felt was pain, sharp, searing pain all over my body. I couldn't move right away, couldn't even make sense of where I was. My head was spinning, and the weight of my injuries hit me all at once. I tried to remember how I had gotten here, but it felt like a fog. Then it all came rushing back. The stormy afternoon, the grain silo collapsing, the overwhelming darkness, and that strange, peaceful presence. My heart raced as I struggled to grasp what had happened. But as the fog lifted, I realized something that stunned me. I was alive. I had survived. For a moment, I just lay there, letting the reality of it sink in. I had been given another chance, not just at life, but at a life that was entirely different from the one I had known. A life filled with purpose, with love, with humility. A life where I didn't have to prove myself, but simply live in connection with others and with God. As I lay there slowly recovering, my mind kept returning to what I had experienced. The presence, the peace, the understanding, it was all still with me, like a quiet whisper that never fully left. I realized that this wasn't just some dream or vision, it was real, and it had changed me. My heart was different, and the way I saw the world was different. I had been shown what truly matters, and I couldn't go back to the way things were before. I knew I had to live differently now. The first thing I did after I was able to leave the hospital was reflect. I thought back on my life, on the way I had been living, always so focused on tradition and rules, on being perfect, on following the right path. But I had missed the point. The real point was love. It was humility. It was living with grace and understanding, not judgment and pride. I had thought I was doing what was right, but I had been missing the heart of it all. When I finally returned home to the community, I knew I had to make changes. I couldn't go back to being the same man I had been. I couldn't just put on the same mask of devotion and expectation. I had seen the truth of who I was, and I knew that I had to be honest with myself and with others if I was going to truly live out what I had learned. I walked into the community with a new heart. At first, I wasn't sure how they would accept me. I had been a figure of authority, a man who was quick to judge and slow to show compassion. But I had been shown something much deeper, and now I wanted to live that out. I wanted to be a source of love and understanding, not condemnation. I wanted to listen, to walk alongside others in their struggles, to be someone who offered support instead of judgment. As I connected with my family, with my neighbors, I could see the difference in their eyes. They could feel it too, the change in me. I wasn't the same man who had left for the hospital. I had learned to listen with empathy, to offer forgiveness and grace, to be present with others in a way I had never known. I realized that following God wasn't about living by the strict rules, but about living with love, humility, and compassion. It was about serving others, not as someone above them, but as someone walking alongside them. I still hold on to the memories of what I experienced, and every day I am reminded that I was given a second chance. It's not always easy, and I still struggle at times, but I now know the true meaning of salvation. It isn't about being perfect. It's about being open to God's love and letting that love transform the way you live. And that's the life I strive to lead now, a life of grace, love, and humility.